Okay, so the goal of the session is, let me set the background briefly. We did this survey recently with the community about motivation, about pride, about how people participate. And one of the pieces of feedback that came back was a feeling in parts of the community that the community can't participate as readily in design as much as would be liked. And also feeling that parts of the community can't influence design. So we got together, Oren and I got together in London, and we were talking about this problem, about how we want to try and improve the feeling in the community whereby people can feel empowered and like they can participate in design. And Oren made a really good point, which is that often there's too much focus on Unity. Like Unity is really interesting and it's a valuable project. But in reality, the focus really shouldn't be so much on Unity. It should be on the idea of building experiences. So one example that we were discussing was, imagine you want to stream music from your computer to your television, or things such as that. These are actually experiences that we have the hardware and the software that can enable us to do this. So we sat down, we started talking about ways in which we can kind of widen this discussion a little bit. I think there's too much in the community at times, there's too much of a viewpoint of design equals Unity, and Unity equals Canonical Design team, where in reality there is a tremendous breadth of opportunity in how people can create these experiences. There's no limiting factor here. If a group of people want to get together to build that experience, to stream music from your computer to your television as an example, there is nothing preventing anyone from doing that. So we started discussing this. Aaron's got a bunch of ideas about how this is going to work. And then I'd like to discuss as well about how we can figure out how we can empower teams of people to do this. Like a lot of teams, if you want to build one of these experiences, you're going to need some designers, some programmers, some testers, some packages. So we figured Aaron's put together some slides, and then we can look through those first, and then maybe discuss how we as a community can empower teams to do that.
And this is the first of sort of 3 related sessions around design. So this one's kind of like, let's get into the ideas. There's another one that the designers who are working on the desktop are going to kind of share some of their passions and what they love about Ubuntu. And then a third session we'll do kind of a follow-up on this one, where we could see if we could get some really concrete actions of how we can get community members participating and what they can do.
Yes. So we've got some slides here. Just before we go through each slide, I'm just going to briefly describe it for the folks who are tuning in from outside of Florida. So
you can share with them on Google if they want. Send a link, change the sharing settings to public if you want. No. But anyways,
I'll read it out.
All right. Just to add about the backdrop of all that, I think with this strategy that Mark basically outlined this morning in the keynote, we're moving into a different space for Ubuntu. It's going to be on every screen, and that makes Ubuntu much more than OS, right? We talked that there was a notion of this, talking about the platform in this morning discussion, and with this emphasis, I guess the focus on Unity should actually go, should fall back a notch, if you may. We need to emphasize what is the added value of having Ubuntu on all multiple screens. And I think that was another kind of part of the discussion we had. So the community is asking to engage in design, and we think of when we think about Ubuntu is that actually with these added screens that we're approaching now, there's going to be so much design that nobody alone could actually pick up on this task. So we just need to kind of develop a way of looking into, of thinking about this ecosystem in a way that can allow us to collaborate over those designs, those possible designs. And I think experiences, talking about experiences and shifting our focus from thinking about user interface to experiences is the key word here. So when we think about an OS traditionally, or from a technical point of view, or from kind of an historical point of view, it was about this trio, right? There's the kernel, there's the middleware, and there's the shell. And Unity pretty much is Ubuntu's kind of statement about what the shell of an operating system should be like. And not only what a shell of an operating should be like on the desktop, but how can we actually make a shell that will be consistent across form factors and screens. This is really bold, and this is really nice. But in fact, the reality is that our users, when they think about Ubuntu or when they think about an operating system, they see that, right? They don't really think about shell, middleware, and kernel. They don't care about that. They think experiences. So they see shopping, they see home entertainment, they see family admin, they see creation, personal media, on the go, learning. And this is just like a couple of examples of what are the experiences our end users see in a computer that has an operating system. So this actually is the major shift that we should kind of transcend together as a community and as kind of a professionals that are engaged working on Ubuntu every day. We need to think not on the shell or Unity or middleware or kernel. We need to think about how do we deliver those experiences. And it seems very simple, but in fact it's very, very complicated because the nature of work is completely different to what we're doing. Right? If we think about how we're organized, pretty much community and Canonical and generally speaking working around Ubuntu, we're very much organized around those streams. Like a lot of us are focused on delivering the shell. There's like a kind of a team, if you may, or a group of teams that are focused on the shell. There are other teams that are focused on the middleware, and other teams are focused on the kernel. And in a way, the promise or the premise of Ubuntu when it was launched is to deliver integration, because Linux was not so good in actually making this stack integrated so the end user would not need to be bothered about that. So guess what? It's the same story, but now fast forward 10 years, and now we have a different story. We have more elements to this stack, right? So if we need to deliver home entertainment, just as an example, what do we mean about when experiences translate into some functionality in the operating system? So we have this kind of couple of examples that I have here. Around home entertainment, we need to play music over the air to remote speakers. On personal media, we need to do over-the-air sync onto local sync as opposed to doing it through the cloud. When it comes to security and privacy, we need to have features like Find My Ubuntu Device or Lock My Ubuntu Device. This is kind of like, that's the benchmark, that's the state of the art outside there on platforms that deliver an ecosystem of features that go across the cloud and screens and a device. And if we look at that, to deliver those experiences, we need to consider way more than what we actually are focused on or organized around model. And in a way, what's happening in Ubuntu in the last 2 years reflects this change, right? We need to consider a stack that includes content, services, applications, the shell, middleware, kernel, hardware, and peripherals. So all of those need to be considered now to deliver those experiences. If in the past we could actually bother about the 3 aspects that we can actually deliver, we don't have this luxury anymore. We have to engage in those aspects as well. So what is the key thing here? Well, we need to think holistically and we need to deliver integration. So if we think about home entertainment, to deliver home entertainment on Ubuntu, we need to have all this stack. We need to have somebody who delivers content. We need to have somebody who takes this content in a service and to deliver it to an end user. We need to have applications that are touch points for those services and allow the interaction with this content. We need to have integration in the shell, middleware, kernel for this consumption to happen. And you can imagine a whole range of functionality on optimization that need to happen in order for something like, say, for the TV and film and TV lens to be available through the dash, something like that. And finally, there's hardware and peripherals. So just as an example, a case study of how might this work. So playing music on remote speaker as a case study. If we look at that, if we look at the stack and how it's distributed, I did this kind of little research by talking to Ronok and Alex Looney about how may we actually deliver playing a feature like playing music on remote speaker. And the reason why we looked into this feature is because, not because it's so maybe attractive to so many users, it's just because this exists out there somewhere like 2006 with our competitors. But also because it's already available in Ubuntu. You can already do that. If you actually have the capacity, everything is in place for you to install the right packages and build the features so it just plays over remote speakers. However, this is not available for the average user. If I download Ubuntu and I want to set that up, and I tried it, I can't do that. I need to go to somebody who will actually help me deliver this experience. And let's look at it. I mean, when we think about the details of it. Well, what we have is really, we have an element of shell, which is kind of very simple. It's a button that allows you to switch on to remote switch, to switch between speakers. Then we can argue where should it be. Should it be in the sound menu? Should it be in sound settings? It's a kind of a worthy argument, but really it's not important because that's not going to deliver this feature. Right? We need some integration with applications, right? Banshee and Rhythmbox, some of them, so I hear, already have that feature built in. That'd be great, and they can do that with certain specific pieces of hardware and peripherals. But we need to make sure that it just works out of the box to deliver that kind of experience. And finally, there's like the middleware stack, right? There's Pulse Audio, and Pulse Audio have this RTP stream, which is probably the protocol that, or the piece of technology that can actually enable that streaming of an audio device over the network. There's a problem of encryption. At the moment, we have only SIP and VoIP, which are naturally voice protocols, encryptions. We need something that delivers music, like high-quality music. There's probably other things that we didn't map because it was kind of a quick discussions. There's something maybe on the kernel level, ALSA, that's the component that deals with that specifically. There's network and sound card drivers, that issue that might need to be solved. And finally, there's a bunch of routers that we need to actually map and help the user actually set up, because it's not going to be just about Ubuntu. It's going to happen also on the device that are going to help us hook those speakers to the network. So this is how we actually think that this translates into a kind of a pragmatic and practical way of actually working together with the community, because the design team, for example, doesn't have much work here. Really, it's just about mapping and pointing out what is the desired outcome. And I think a lot of people can actually raise those concerns about what is the best home entertainment scenarios for us to focus on. And in fact, it shouldn't be the design team pointing at those experiences, but we just kind of have the framework. We need to think home entertainment, and naturally people would start thinking about features like that, sexy, needed, required features when we think about somebody's living room. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we can discuss that specific feature, but really it's just an example. And we just want to hear from you. What do you think about that, and how can we actually start building that, mapping those features, and maybe kind of seeing teams from the community that maybe involve the design team and some other resources of design from within the community to actually deliver those features and experiences.
So how do you imagine that would work? That is, you've already identified a set of starting points with the experiences you've
Mapped out.
Something that it's very, design is inherently something that's very difficult to scale, and something doing design also relies on is a lot of high bandwidth communication and between the people working in a team. So when you're working on kind of any specific feature area, or as we're working on a user journey, we use whiteboards, we use post-it notes, we use, even with our remote team members, we form tight relationships. We're bouncing things back and forward between developers, and there's some QA, and a lot of, I think there's been some frustration, because a lot of the way that we've been trying to incorporate community into the design process is by people fielding suggestions on IATANA mailing lists, etc. But that doesn't really fit into this high bandwidth environment where you're focused on delivering a specific experience. So, but what I think is there's a bigger world out there. There's a lot of experiences that we aren't looking at, and as Oren said, the shell is only a small element. So it's really about, can community people form into small groups where they have those high bandwidth, tight interactions of a community designer working with a community developer, working with a community packager, and they can focus on a problem area, working on a specific application, a specific experience, and then if there's any support we can provide. But it's really, I think people have thought there's a lot of limits, like, no, we can't do this because the Canonical Design team has to do that, and it's not at all. It's thinking, well, this is an artificial constraint.
That's the key message, is that, and this is where I think the basis of this is, there is a feeling in the community that the Canonical Design team is a bottleneck, because it's a very high bandwidth environment that works on a common set of goals. And I think that to a reasonable degree, it is a fairly integrated team, and it can be difficult for the community to participate. But the point here is that is that most of the 95% of what the design team works on is actually a tiny proportion of what Ubuntu is, which is the shell and other bits. Whereas there is a wealth of experiences here that we want to support community building teams.
I think another good model to look at is the Apple community. Apple has a massive community of designers and developers working together to create iOS applications, and that community has really grown over the last 2 years massively. And there's a lot of forums, there's a lot of meetings, they've got a very vibrant ecosystem, and that's the ecosystem we need to get in a fully open world. So we can have that kind of vibrant ecosystem of designers and developers working together to build things on top of and around the platform.
I was wondering if this is something that either the accessibility team can help with, or we can look at some of the accessibility models, because that's one place where you've got zillions of user experiences, some of which have really serious needs that have to build into a specific framework and stuff. And it's something that I think within the Ubuntu accessibility team, we're still really learning how to really make that work. But I'm more than happy to go talk to like the GNOME accessibility team, who've done a lot more work on this. One thing I'm planning on working on too, that I've been talking to Charlene about, is really I want to go in during this cycle and go to there's a school for the deaf near me, go to some of the centers, to really work with people to find out what their needs are and stuff, and how to integrate that together.
It strikes me that's a good example, because I think the way open source traditionally works, the way the Ubuntu community has definitely worked, is that we're very interrupt driven and we're iterative. So what happens is, we think of things in small parcels of work, right? They're often components of wider projects, so we'll think, okay, we need to fix this bug, or we'd like to add this feature. And often they are relatively isolated pieces of work. And I think the point of this work is instead of, let's fix it, using your example, instead of fixing these bugs, it would be, what is the accessibility experience in Ubuntu in a particular part of the system?
And that's a lot of what we talk about, partially because we currently have people who come back and say we can't use NT or Unity at all at this point, and stuff. And so it's that's something that you have to look at from the accessibility point of view, rather than just the really specific.
So there are some times when it's unavoidable, but at the moment we've got a situation where there's a centralized bottleneck, and I think this bottleneck really only exists in our minds, and that's what we need to break free of. That a lot of the requests are coming, into the Unity design team where there isn't, the design or the development capacity to field them, and that doesn't need to happen. So if there's an accessibility experience from this research,
the problem for most of the users I talk to is, we code it, but we literally can't. So, and I think that's something, and it's something that's a separate issue specifically for accessibility, but I think I do think you're right that there's a bottleneck, and actually design is not so much at this point where people are having this many issues, so it's, it's forming that small team of a packager and one or two developers, so that between the people in that team you can have those high bandwidth conversations and you can focus on delivering that experience. And that bypasses this centralized band.
So this is the focus of this session, is that when we talked about this, the idea is that there are a wealth of these experiences. I'm sure if we were to sit down and write on a whiteboard, we'd be able to think of 15 cool experiences that you can have in Ubuntu when we think about just the end goal, about what you get. What I'm really interested in...
I more meant that it's a place where we're already doing this to a certain extent, looking at the end goal and figuring out how
I agree. I'm not saying that's not happening. I'm just saying in terms of the wider look of the community.
I think this would actually, I think she's right, this would be a really good example of teams who are kind of already doing a similar thing. It's a different set of goals or a different set of implementation issues, but it's sort of the same pattern of let's get together on a small focus group to solve a few problems.
That's what I was
and it's a very good example.
So the equivalent would be like a home entertainment team, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, actually.
Well, what I'd like to explore in this session, particularly in Kickoff, and this is going to be a series of sessions, is how do we build these teams and how do we support them to be successful? Like Oren the other day when we were talking about this drew something similar to one of his slides, which is this, essentially if you think about the pipeline of things you need to do to deliver this experience, everything from conceptualizing how it works to the different levels of the stack to how it interacts with users, but then also how you test it and how you package it and integrate it into Ubuntu as well. And what I'd like us to try and explore is I get the impression that whatever the experience is, whether it's accessibility, whether it's harmonization, whatever else, the core ingredients of how you make a team successful are relatively common, and there's a lot of common roles in there. So, for example, you could create the most incredible experience in the world, but if no one's going to integrate into Ubuntu, it's going to go, no one's going to see it. Or you could have something that's got impeccable code, but it's got a terrible user interface, or it doesn't integrate into the UI in an interesting way. So my initial breakdown in my head was design, programming, testing, and packaging. But what do you folks think? I mean, if we were to create a blueprint for how one of these teams would function, what do you think are the important characteristics of those teams? I mean, do you think those 4 roles are enough? Like, for example, if someone said, I think it would be cool for us to be able to stream music to my television. If you could find a designer, a programmer, a tester, and a packager, do you think that would be enough?
Documentation. You're going to need to have someone who's writing documentation. And I don't think you want that to fall on the 4 people you've already listed.
But do you think documentation is a requirement?
Yeah,
Or just that
because people are
just
not.
a nice?
I think it would depend on the scale of the actual project, basically. I mean, if it's simply file sharing, if looking at, for example, streaming music to your television or anything like that, it could be just a simple Banshee extension. So you just make sure it's enabled or installed. But if it's something more complex, then yes, documentation would definitely be somebody
Yeah.
else.
That was my answer as well.
But I think it's a little too simplistic to say it could just be a Banshee extension, because when you look at I'm sorry. I mean to attack your idea, but what I mean is we need to think in a larger sense, right? The whole point of this is to create a complete experience and really think of all of the different things that this may touch, right? With music streaming, Banshee is just the front end that people see, but how do they start in the first place? How do they know they can put a Banshee and enable some kind of streaming? Right?
Yeah, I don't know what hardware they need to buy.
It strikes me that in terms of moving this forward, because I think what we've discussed, what we'd like to try and build is just a culture in which you have loads of these little skunkwork projects that kick off, building experiences. And some will get nowhere and some will float to the surface, and trying to see what the secret sauce is and how we make those teams successful, and how we as a community can support those teams to be successful, and also how we can yield resources such as the Canonical Design team in how to do that. And I'm wondering whether maybe a good start is for us to try and identify some folks who'd be really interested in doing the first one of these, and then trying to support them to be successful. And then at the next UDS, as an example, review how they did and adjust the formula.
I think it's also equally important, apart from defining the roles and then assigning people to those, especially if it's small teams, to kind of let the community participate from our experience about how these different roles or sections actually communicate and how to pass information from one step to the other, so that it's reliable, reproducible, and actually scales to more people coming into the team because the project gets bigger, or then spanning across multiple teams working on different parts of a bigger experience, so that at the end, even if people sit at different ends of the world and never seen each other, never worked together, if they have a common language of process, it will magically just fit, and there will be no friction and time being lost. And I think that's a crucial part of the equation to get that done.
And I guess there's some insight from Canonical here, right? Because Canonical's face those challenges in how the design team works on the design work, and then how that flows into the engineering side of things, right? So I guess there's some experience with that.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of actually having that in a way. We would love to actually have enough capacity to think about home entertainment and have a home entertainment team.
I think,
but it's kind of at this point, it's just
the key
luxury.
I think the key thing is that to form a successful team, you need the scope to be right. You need something where every time you have to leap outside of that small team, whether it's working internally in Canonical, whether it's working with the community, with someone external, and this equally applies if you're a small community team. Every time you've got to leap outside the scope of that team, you've got a lot of latency. It takes time, it slows process down. So you need to look for problem areas that can be self-contained within that team. This doesn't apply to all problem areas, but where you can get self-contained, you can build those relationships, you can move quickly, and you can produce a really great experience. Areas which aren't so suitable, to give the inverse, are things which require, say, you've got a bunch of changes in the actual Unity shell to make. You've got a bunch of changes, in other third-party software. Where you've got these external connections, you're going to slow down, and you're going to be less able to deliver the experience. So it's forming these self-contained teams, and then the personal relationships. And once you've got those strong personal relationships and that strong bandwidth, you can move very quickly.
So let's get down to brass tacks, right? How do we do that? I mean, what can we do to, when we have a community, when we have 4 or 5 people who are interested in fulfilling these different roles, how do you feel like we can just...
Well, perhaps rather than starting from a blank sheet of paper, there's some existing projects. I know, occasionally there are various things drop into my inbox of someone saying, "Oh, I'm building this. It's quite cool. We'd love to do some more design. We'd love to make a better experience." So taking something maybe that's a pre-existing community project and seeing if some goodness can be added. I think that's a lot easier than starting from from a standing start.
From people in the room, do we have community members in the room who are interested in design or user experience? Maybe this is something you do in your job or just something you're interested in. Who'd be interested in joining in teams
Or
like
an
this?
IRC.
Yeah, that's good.
I kind of think that that mention about the accessibility story is interesting because in a way it's before you even have a team, you need for people to kind of have a space to discuss. So there will be an opportunity for people to hook up each other and see that they share some ideas, and then a team might emerge. So actually having channels to discuss specific experiences, like say home entertainment, similar to what we have, the Ayatana framework is about Unity and the shell. Instead, we need to have some forums for discussing home entertainment. So that would be a magnet for people who are interested in delivering experience features or specifics in that experience.
I mean, one of the big problems with the Ayatana mailing list is it's a forum for ideas, and ideas are very cheap. Everyone has a lot of ideas. What makes something successful is work, and it's especially. We come to a conference, there's a lot of discussions, but it's informing that team of having those close connections with the people doing some work. If you really want, if someone wants to be involved in making those decisions, in changing that experience, in creating that experience, they also have to put in their time. That doesn't come for free. And there's in the Ayatana mailing list, we've got masses of people. But there isn't a direct connection between the people posting ideas and the people actually building the features. And building communities where you have where those people are one and the same, I think will be more successful.
Yeah. So do we have certain use cases, to your point of getting out of brass tacks? Do we have any that we think are common?
Yeah, it strikes me that I think what we want to do, my hunch here is, this is a big, to me this is a project management issue in many cases. It's like what we're trying to do is figure out how people can form small teams and be as effective as possible, and how we can deliver success in a light way, non-bureaucratic way. And I'm wondering, I think probably what would be the worst thing for us to do is to go out and make a lot of noise about this, and we have 5 teams form are doing cool and interesting experiences, but then they all fall flat in the face because we don't have time to support them. My hunch is that I'm sure at some point throughout this week, we will be able to put together a team of people who are interested in working on an experience, whether it's in the accessibility team or whether it's somewhere else. And then what we do is I think we spend some time as a group who's interested in this, helping to support those folks and keeping an eye on what's going on and what worked and what didn't work. And then we review it at each UDS and we see how is it working out. And then once we have a bit of a formula, I think we can then start building it further afield.
There's also a lot of what's right for one team might be different from what's right for another team, and it's those people who are highly committed and participating to find what works for them.
Yeah.
Everyone might be in the same time zone. They might be in widely dispersed time zones. That forces some changes in process. For example, the type of project may have slightly different requirements.
A good example of this, which is comparative, is one thing that we do in the community every cycle is we have these education weeks. And these weeks involve people who are delivering sessions, people who are organising the structure, people who are running the IRC channel. There's a lot of different disciplines. There's people who are moderating the channel. There's lots of people feed into it. But it's got to a point now where the process is so defined, and we've learned enough of the lessons, like organising UDS, that it's repeatable. And now the people are running those sessions that weren't involved in constructing that initiative. And I think that's, to me, is where we want to kind of get to. So it strikes me that the first thing we need to do is identify a team.
Yes.
Is there anyone in this room who wants to build an experience?
Can I think that in the presentation, one word that was really important was holistic. And I think that the way that it was divided by activities or by what the user wants to do was very important. And that is something that's going to be very easy to lose if we're not very careful about how we set it up. And I wonder if the first step is not to start looking at these big areas and creating some clusters of technology or of experience, and start maybe having smaller projects but very well coordinated between themselves, so we don't lose track of the experience itself.
Yeah, I think it's a strong point.
Yeah.
Do you think there are people who are interested, who would be interested in participating in this kind of team that aren't here? Like, if you're interested in this area, do you think there's other people who maybe probably aren't on IRC even right now who would be interested?
Especially like the home, the entertainment example, there's people like the Ubuntu Studio project who would be very interested in learning about this focus, or the Ubuntu project.
Yeah.
They have their own use cases that are very similar to this. So I think it's very important to make sure that they're engaged when we create one of these things, that we reach out to the existing teams that are sort of in the same area. So they might not be...
Part of the reason we split this into the initial idea session and then a later practical session is to give, folks who are here in the room a chance to go out, I don't know, blog about it, tweet about it, whatever, talk to someone you think might be interested, and then get their ideas as well, and then bring it back into... So we may not have the people in the room right now who would form this team, like a initial team, but we may have the people who know the people who know the people who can bring it all together.
You know what we may want to do is just pick a blueprint. I mean, I'm sure that someone, at some point this week, there is a blueprint for a feature or an experience. Not just a feature, but a wider experience.
But that's really like, home entertainment can have like an umbrella of like hundreds of projects on there. If you really become like a top-notch home entertainment experience, then it will be like gazillions of things.
No, I agree. I think we need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think if we spend too much time mapping out everything that we can do, then we'll get nowhere. I think we need to pick something and help that team to be successful.
Could you bring up that slide again that we were looking at earlier?
I think with this already you have enough material for a call for participation, right? Which is what you're looking for, and then identifying the people both with a design perspective. I was thinking also in a team, someone who knows the deep creation aspects of connecting the dots to that this feature is going to work across the shell, the platform, and so on.
Yeah.
And just maybe like articulating what you imagine would go into the personal media circle, RN, would be a good way to inspire people and get proposals, right?
So,
crystallize the energies.
We definitely think of kind of posting it somewhere and kind of creating some sort of a map that people can actually see it evolve along time as teams start to organize, and we see like teams that inside those big clusters, that are just to get visibility, I guess. But so I think from Charlene's point, for me actually, it's really actually important that those teams will be actually having some way of seeing themselves in a bigger picture. So maybe a team should be a home entertainment team. I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, I guess there are two kind of thoughts here. One, a team should be very specific, narrow, kind of aiming to deliver like a feature. But I think there's a value for a team to have like kind of a way to think together, a space so they can actually think about home entertainment as opposed to just thinking about one experience. Because like say that could end up somebody saying, oh, let's just write an extension to Banshee. Sorry about this example, but that's exactly the difference between thinking about holistically to thinking about like something. Just make a tick somewhere.
I think we get there. I think part of the thing here is that what we're talking about here is culturally quite a different way of us viewing what we do, because like I said earlier on, the impression I get is that we often think about bugs and about blueprints and specific features as opposed to the wider experiences, as opposed to what is the user going to actually experience and how can we deliver and what the different components are involved. I get the impression that, for example, starting off with using the often lauded example of streaming music from your computer to your television I imagine that if we could build a team that delivers that successfully and they feel everyone's impressed with their success, I could imagine that not only encouraging other people, but then that folding into a wider home entertainment team. Because I guess what worries me is if we form too big of a team, which could potentially build like 30 different experiences, they'll get so wrapped up in what we're going to do and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to doing one thing, do it really successful, and then kind of building on that. That's my kind of, just my hunch.
Yeah, and it's you know, within home entertainment is it's a wide area, and the streaming music to TV, perhaps that's an area again which doesn't have too many of those external dependencies.
Yeah.
So I think to Alison's point, maybe today we don't choose the exact topics. We need some time to think about it, and other people socialize this. But we could come up with some concrete stuff like, how many projects do we want to do in this cycle? Like, say, we're going to pick 3, and each topic is going to be a small topic. It's not going to be a big thing. And then what people need to be in each team. So we can work on some logistics. And then on Thursday, maybe we hone that a bit, but at least something comes out of the session. Because I don't think anybody here disagrees that this is...
So why don't we, well, here's a suggestion. Feel free to shoot it down, everyone. Let's do one thing. Let's do one thing in 1204. Like one team delivers one experience. And then we have someone on the design team who can support the design component of that experience and provide some of the insight that the design team have learned. And I think maybe even somebody on the DX team who can support the implementation side of the experience, and then someone on my team who can help with the communication and all that kind of stuff. Maybe by the end of this week, we don't necessarily know what the experience is going to be, but maybe we'll review all the output from UDS and see. I'm sure someone somewhere in this building is planning an experience that's going to be delivered. And if there isn't anyone, then we can see if we can encourage some people to participate. But I'm just thinking, like, if we get to the next UDS and we have a success story, just one success story, I think that'll be really motivating around encouraging people.
I think it's a good point for the first time we do it. We just concentrate on looking at one thing successful.
Yeah. It's a bit like, you remember like when, I think it was when we were talking about the Ubuntu One music store, their goal was to be able to, like, you can buy one song. Right. That was like such a concrete, specific goal. And it really helped the team to deliver around that. So I'm thinking.
So who do we think are the essential members of the team? We're talking through this before a little bit. Right, we're talking about accessibility, documentation, testing. One thing I was thinking about, in order to think about what are all the pieces do we need an architect? Somebody who thinks across the whole spectrum and saying,
right,
we need these pieces.
It's a good point, because like when we were talking the other day, I noticed that's what Oren was doing. Like when you were talking about the streaming, like you were being an architect, right? You were looking over the whole thing. Right. Not necessarily knowing all the details of the alpha layer of the thing, but being able to see how the pieces fit together.
At least where you should.
And I'm wondering whether we have that skill in the community as wide as we'd like it, because a lot of people work at docs or translations. I mean, maybe that's a skill that this was. Sorry?
You need to have some points experience.
Oh, for that specific feature?
Yeah, that's what's needed. You need some optimization points. Elsewhere's fine, don't worry about elsewhere. Posts, you send them building page about streaming, and I know about post stuff.
So your architect is effectively your project manager, right?
Yeah.
The person who's coordinating the whole thing, making sure that somebody's chosen for each of the 5 key areas, whatever we have, and then everybody's moving forward. Right?
Yeah. It seems like that often happens like naturally in community projects or in canonical projects, you know, like there's always someone who's just helping to have this kind of, this holistic oversight over what's going on in the project. Yeah. And it strikes me that this would be an important piece.
Right.
So, I mean, what would be cool is if we could identify what this project, maybe everybody here can just keep an eye on what's going on at UDS and just see if there's something, if there is an experience that's just naturally bubbling to the surface, and then we can just support that team to be successful.
I think considering we want to do one, we'll give it a few days for people to talk about it. I think maybe in that session we could we'll come up with a concrete list at the beginning of the session and then say, okay, we're going to talk through these 10 options and figure out which is the best one to do. And that maybe would be the good use of that one. But in this session, can we write down the basics of who do we need in the team?
So I'm going to...
I can also see a value in a bigger. I mean, this is really nice. So we focus on the delivery, but I still see a value on us making that a discussion and allowing people to even just say that would be a great feature to have. I think this is a great way to actually, you know, part of what's happening is now people feel that there's no kind of the discussion that should have been or people expect to have with the design team or with people actually working on making Ubuntu happen. It's not really happening. I think that could actually be an opportunity to put a discussion out in the open, and it's no harm in actually the fact that it doesn't translate immediately into features, because you know, by I think the talking has a value, the discussion and the communication on top of that has a value of its own, both from the fact that we want to move or shift people attention to the idea we're talking about experience, so that actually the communication value of this is immense.
That's, you know, we have, there's a lot of ongoing design discussion with the community. The problem is it's taking it from the point of we're having a lot of discussion. You know, we're doing, there's discussions happening everywhere all the time. You know, but it's taking that through to building concrete improvements. And it's how we can move that discussion from a lot of discussion with the Canonical Design team between community members to actually delivering improved experiences.
A good example of this is about 2 years ago, we'd come to you, or 2 or 3 years ago, we'd come to UDS, and people would have all, in the community track, people would have all of these ideas about we can build websites to do this and this and this and these features. These would be cool, and it'd be a very creatively invigorating environment. And then nothing would happen because there wasn't the resources in the team, and people didn't feel empowered to do that. And now we have a community web development team. So when the community has ideas about things, there's actually a facility in which there's actually a group of people who can implement it, and that makes the creative ideas generation part of it even more invigorating.
But it's an easy example because again it's a silo. Web development is a silo. When here you want actually to go across silo, web development would be equal to having a shell team on the community.
No, my only point is that what I think John's point is ideas. Everyone's got ideas, right? But actually implementing them is the problem. Is that people post to Ayatana, they say, "Hey, wouldn't this be cool?" and then nothing happens.
Now where it does work on a very small level, which is again this very much featured focus and what we're trying to overcome and scale up, is on Launchpad. So we have a lot of bugs, we receive a lot of bug submissions, we have bug discussions, and we have people doing the work and posting bug patches, which we accept. And this is on a very, very, very small scale. It's how can we scale it up so it's not focused so much on the minute detail, but on the bigger picture.
So I have a question for community council members, and that is, we're talking about a community team, right? Does this seem like a good way of structuring teams, of encouraging engagement from community members in user experience and design?
I think so. Involving community and the user experience is the way to go. It's the forward, to be honest. Like even Launchpad are doing it today, and doing the user experience, involving the community, getting their opinions and their feedback, but taking it on board rather than just nodding your head and saying thank you for the feedback. I think well, do something different. Either give them feedback as to why it wasn't accepted, I think is important as well. So take and use the user experience, but also give them feedback as to why.
And make sure that provide a way that their ideas can actually get worked into the
so also give them
distribution.
feedback as to why it isn't possible.
So
feasible.
This is one of our one of our challenges. We've got limited resource, and we actually spend over half of my day engaging in discussion with people. We're discussing, but the demand for discussion is greater than the available capacity. So a critique that is often leveled at us is not getting back and explaining in as much detail as required. And that's down to basically a function of not having enough time. And what we want to do with this is move away from it. People like wanting to discuss. I think Unity should work this way. Let's think about the shell. To I don't actually need to discuss with these people. I can form a team of people independently, and we can have the discussions between ourselves together, and we can deliver a great experience on top of it, and remove that dependency, because having that dependency there is not scalable. You need it for some discussions, for some things it's unavoidable.
I think you need it for some discussions, you're right, but if you close it off, and it's going to come back and bite you then as well. You can say it's going to work with these experiences, but not every experience. They're going to say, well,
I agree
with you that there isn't enough time in the day, to be honest.
Yeah.
And answering back and forth versus the hires, you can take up an awful lot of time as well.
Yeah, but for these experiences, really moving them into being entirely community projects, so there isn't, you know, a design dependency. There isn't someone bouncing back going, oh, what does Canonical Design think? We should move the shell. No, let's think of things that we're building on top of the shell and underneath the shell. That build on top of what we've already got, and they don't have the dependencies. They're
So
not
like empowering the community to make a decision about what some experience should be like and make it happen.
And go and build it.
Because that would be the team I would say to start with. Because that's a really good team and
Is she?
accessibility.
That's me, is who she was just talking about.
Yeah.
That would be the team I would say to talk to and work with the user experience. If you're test one weekend, see how that goes, because that affects everybody on many different levels.
Right.
But even, I mean, the accessibility team is a good example
Yeah, I
because
think we need to break down into something smaller.
I was going to say, because the
for that.
accessibility team doesn't have the resources to do some of these
But they-
projects.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking if we maybe breaking it down, and I'll talk to, we can bring this up in the development session about accessibility. The big thing is getting eZoom integration.
So maybe we could pick one user
So I'm
one
wondering
user
if we pick
experience for
one
accessibility
specific
too.
thing, because that's something that probably may get pushed to being more community.
Yeah, because it's
rather
really the same problem, right? You've got these bands of user experience
Right.
across the whole distro, and you want instead of having, you know, a really small focus in one area, you want to make sure they have a good user experience all the way
Right.
through that
And-
one piece.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, I was thinking that maybe that's, you know, picking one of the things that absolutely, it's not a polishing, but is natural, still needs to get worked on with it. And that would be the one that comes to mind at the moment, because that's
I mean,
the one that has to get fixed.
with accessibility, there's again it's looking for these more self-contained areas of experience where the community can be empowered to basically do the design, do the building, do everything themselves without asking. Some areas of accessibility are actually very intrinsically linked into the shell and will be very difficult doing this project.
And
But there's some
I
other
don't even
areas.
know if that'll work for that particular thing, but it's something that I would definitely, you know, I'm looking into, and I'm trying to think of
Cool.
ways, because we've already got some of the team integration of having
Excellent.
testing, developer,
Excellent.
So, I've been noting down some actions about like whether I want to put this on the whiteboard so we can keep track of what's going on. So I'll identify. I was going to take an action to we can review this later this week. Is just to look at what options we've got right now and.
I might put in there two. So one accessibility user experience and one general user experience. So we're kind of covering two.
I really think we should pick one. I just think that if we have one experience, even whether it's accessibility.
I suspect accessibility is going to be doing it anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason why other people couldn't do it, but I think if we pick one that we can explicitly support.
So you're looking for a topic?
Like, yeah.
The idea is like to pick one, like in the same way we like look at media as like one tiny stripe across. So see if we can do one end-to-end accessibility experience, because it's kind of a different.
What I'd like to recommend we do is.
Investigate your future vacation. And part of that is making that accessible. So it's
So-
an aspect of every single.
So what I'd like to recommend we do is that we look at everything that's been discussed at UDS, and there's probably a session about building an experience, whether it's accessibility or anything else, that is delivering an experience in Ubuntu with a set of actions and people who have signed up to it and all the rest of it. And what I'm going to suggest is that we pick one of those things, and then when we identify that, we identify who's in charge of that, or who's coordinating that team, and that person will have an action to put together, identify the different roles. Like the core roles of design, programming, testing, and integration, there may also be documentation or translations as we discussed. And then I'd be more than happy to have a monthly call with whoever that person is, just to get on the phone and just say, how's everything going? Is there anything I can help with? Is there anything we in Canonical can help with? John's already put in his volunteered a monthly commitment. Is that your Launchpad ID?
No.
If you could stick your Launchpad ID in there.
Doesn't do that? I'm not sure my Launchpad ID is.
I think it's John.
John Lake?
This way, yeah. These are because I'm putting these actions in the blueprint format, so I can so it switches on my go and hassle people function. And then a monthly commitment. We'll identify a monthly commitment from engineering. I'd like to recommend someone on the DX team, just because there's an experience of working with designers. And then I'm happy to provide a commitment from the community component. And then I'll also take an action to schedule sessions with the next UDS so we can all get together again and review how we did. So as an example, we find a team at UDS who wants to stream music from your computer to your television, right? And then every month, John reaches out and says, how's everything going with the design? What can I do to help?
Yeah.
Someone from DX reaches out and says, hey, how can we help with that in terms of how the different components fit together? And then what we'll do is we'll basically do an autopsy on it at the next UDS and see how that worked, and then we'll tweak some things and provide some guidance. And then at the next UDS, I'd recommend we try and build out more than one expert.
What about, I mean, say there needs to be some sort of past UDS, like an effort to keep recruiting those people, essentially.
I'm thinking
something around that.
My hunch is that we spend the next 6 months making this really successful and really well documented. So by the time we get to the next UDS, we've got this real trophy of this team that was entirely community delivered this experience in Ubuntu, and it's awesome. And this is how they did it. And then we use that as we then get Mark to get up there and say, look at what they did.
So what I'd like to see between now and the third session, which is I think on Wednesday or Thursday, is if there's people in the room who are interested, community members who are interested in participating in one of these teams, talk to, I'm going to say Jono, talk to Jono, and in the next session I would like it to be only community members sitting in the center here. That's all the people who are interested.
Yeah. I agree.
That's good.
You just want to get up. All right, so I'm going to stick these. So thank you, Maxlow. John, so those actions look good. They're officially going into the whiteboard. This means it's become actual work now.
Oh, you want to choose an experience? I would recommend they actually play on the remote speakers much easier on task than on TVs.
Let's see what suggestions come up.
Yeah, we'll have to see we'll see what people are discussing.
It's really not for us to decide.
Right, that's what's the point. Somehow for us to kind of...
Yeah.
No, but what I mean is like what we can't do today, within the limitations of what we can actually influence, we can't really. I mean, much as I'd love to see, for example, music on remote speakers.
But we need a team to come to us and suggest.
Exactly.
It's not,
primarily for this thing, because I think in future cycles, when people see these experienced teams being successful, imagination will start brewing, and so this one's going to be a bit more kind of reserved, I guess, than ultimately where I think we'll get to. But we'll have a success story.
People will get bolder once they see that stuff working, and they'll say, okay, let's level it up, and let's level it up again.
And the real crap rock ideas will start coming out. All right.
Cool. I think that's
it. Thanks everyone for coming along.